It's working. Oh, and by the way, eventually I'm going to produce this. We'll have an intro, we'll have music, we have sponsors, we have a whole thing. But for now, we're just going to dive right in, and we'll
Cool.
get it all looking and sounding pretty later. Okay, levels look okay. Yeah. All right, here we go. Excuse me. Okay, today my guest is Sarah Stone from Douglas Elliman. She's in Fairfield County, Connecticut, Greenwich, Westport, and also in New York in Westchester as well. Let me tell you more about Sarah. Sarah, this is really an impressive biography, so I really want you guys to clue in on this because we're going to touch about a lot of what I'm about to mention here. So Sarah was a top producing broker at Douglas Elliman's Manhattan office at 575 Madison Avenue for a decade. She was Rookie of the Year during her tenure there in Manhattan. She sold many, many high profile properties, including 65th East 76th, 800 Park Avenue, and the world famous Dakota building, which is at 1 West 72nd. She has now taken her experience, knowledge, and famed sales experience and expanded it from New York into the Connecticut suburbs, specializing in the purchase and sale of fine homes in both Fairfield and Westchester counties. Sarah also has a fine eye for exterior and interior design. She's an expert in staging and decorating a home. She's resided and raised children in both Bedford, New York and Greenwich, Connecticut. She is the perfect guide to find or sell your own suburban splendor. A former nationally ranked tennis player, which I would love to ask a few questions to improve my own game, Sarah spends her free time playing tennis and also pickleball. And I do want to talk about pickleball because the noise of it is my only issue with pickleball is noise, but it is a fun game. In one of Greenwich's most beautiful town parks or clubs, Sarah can also be spotted driving around in her vintage Mercedes convertible. I want everybody to follow Sarah on her Instagram. She has an amazing Instagram following, Sarah Stone Style. So SSS, Sarah with an H, Stone Style. So at Sarah Stone Style, we'll have a link to that in the show notes and also a link to her Douglas Elliman website. Definitely check her out on social. She does some really super cool things. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. That was an extraordinary intro. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. It's a
We really
pleasure to be
appreciate
here.
you coming on. Thank you. We appreciate you, and coming on our show is a big deal for us. We know just how busy top producers like you are, and it's been the biggest and loveliest surprise for me as starting the show like 5 or 6 years ago, in thinking, oh, none of these top producers are ever going to have time for this, and yet here we are, like 500 episodes later, and still being able to get top producers like you to give us some time that I know is in short supply for you. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure.
Let's start at the beginning. So how did you get into real estate and why?
So, my journey to real estate actually started, I'd say, fairly early on, relatively speaking. I graduated with a degree in economics from Tulane University down south. And I at that time, my goal was let me get a job that will make me the most amount of money the quickest. I wasn't like, oh, what's my passion and what am I good at? And, not. I was like, let me get into Wall Street and let's get cracking.
Sure.
And that's what I did. I worked for a mutual fund called Lord Abbott. That was my first job.
Sure. Sure.
That I was in the GM building on 58th Street, right across from the Plaza Hotel. And I got my Series 7, my Series 7 and 63.
I had those both as well. My first
Oh
job as
yeah,
a financial advisor, so I know
yep.
that world. Yeah.
So I was working as I was working with regional managers to sell our various funds, and I
Sure.
did that for a little bit there, and then I moved on to another bank, DLJ, which is back from that's sort of a 90s, was a boutique kind of bank back then that was bought by Credit Suisse First Boston while I was there. When as I was working at DLJ, I worked as a registered sales assistant for the bigger brokers, retail brokers there. And it's a very fast paced, high pressure, male dominated, especially back
Sell, sell,
then,
sell. Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And it's frantically paced, although, not to say that this business isn't, but it was just, it was something like, ooh, is this really, did I pick the right thing for me? And this is when my introspective examination of my thoughts and goals truly and truly were. And it, this is another bit of a diversion, but I was always into, I wanted to be into acting, theater, modeling, and that kind of thing. So
Sure.
I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to try, I'm going to go for all that stuff. I'm going to go for my dreams, but the pay isn't so great when you're starting out. So I said, I'm going to subsidize that with, I'll sell some real estate on the side. I had gone through the process of renting an apartment in Manhattan, and I saw, I got a little bit of a window into how all that worked. And I saw I asked my broker a lot of questions. And in Manhattan, especially, I mean, back then, you were paying a 15% commission to your broker as
Yeah,
a
let's talk about
renter.
this. Let's pause for a second because this is a very important distinction. When Sarah's like, "Oh, okay, I really am acting, modeling. I want to pursue that, and I'll do some real estate on the side." What if you don't know if you don't know rentals in New York City? One of the things that she's explaining right now, and I apologize for being rude and interrupting, but I want to make sure everyone understands this. It's very different from pretty much every major market. Maybe Boston's a little bit this way too, but Boston and New York, I think, are the only two markets that do this, where oftentimes the
Oh
renter
yeah,
pays the commission, which is a tough sell, right? That is
right.
hard. Oh, by the way, I need an extra $5,000.
Yeah, on top of, I mean,
Yeah.
New York
On top
City
of first month,
rent,
last month. Yeah.
first month, last
Yeah.
month, and your security deposit, and here's another, 15% of the year's rent. So, yeah, definitely, it was something that I made note of when I was going through the process, like, whew, doing the math. Let's see if, and this is just rentals. I wasn't even thinking about the sales game then. So I had a friend, I had sort of a connection at Douglas Elliman, and they, well, they said, Let's give it a shot, do your thing." And that first year I made 10 times what I made doing the acting modeling gig in real estate. So
Amazing.
I found that I really had a knack for it. And not only that, I enjoyed get because I just love New York City so much. And I
Yeah.
found that I really had so much passion for just checking it all out and getting to
Yeah.
know all the different neighborhoods. And like, how great is that? Like, my job is just kind of to cruising around the city and checking out all all kind, I mean, especially in those early days, you wouldn't believe, like, what I was, it wasn't all glamour, trust me. It was, I was trying, like, to sell this studio that was above a Subway sandwich shop that
Sure.
smelled like
Smelled like bread all the time.
that Subway bread. I still, to this day,
It's burned into
walk
my
I
sense
can't walk
memory.
into a
Yeah.
Subway. I can't do it. It just takes me back to, like, I was probably, I must have shown that thing over 50 times. So I spent a lot of time in that apartment.
Oh,
Um, but that's sort of like how it was definitely, the money was great at that time. And it was, I found that I really enjoyed it, and it was something that I was really good at. So I just sort of morphed more and more, making that into my full-time occupation.
And so you really built your career in the city, and then you then made eventually made a move. And so essentially, I mean, it wasn't like you moved across the country, so it was neighboring, but still far enough away where it's a different world, at least a bit of a different world. And having to sort of start over essentially is in incredible. It's almost like an attorney who passes the bar in New York, and then all of a sudden it's like, I think I really want to live in Arizona. It's like, well, they now have to go do it all over again in Arizona.
Right, right, right.
And so you essentially had a similar kind of experience where you were moving from Manhattan, which is insanely a challenging market to be a realtor in, whether you're doing rentals, sales. I've interviewed tons of people, even from your firm, who work in New York. How challenging? Of course, we all know how challenging it is, and then to then go somewhere else and say, "Oh, I'm going to like start all over," essentially. And again, I understand it's not completely starting over, but essentially it is. So that is even more amazing, is that you were rookie of the year in New York, and then back into the suburbs as your life changed. And so, what was that transition like going to a new market, a new area, and trying to build your business again?
Well, I'm very grateful for my firm, Douglas Elliman, because the fact that they're the biggest mover of real estate in Manhattan, and they had opened up an Element office in Greenwich about 5 years prior to my joining. So they had nice established referral thing going on their own. I stepped in with a lot of pre-existing relationships with brokers that I had worked with in Manhattan while I was there. And while I was in the city, I should mention, I was, I worked in three different offices while I was there. I was at 575, but I was also on the Upper West Side for a little bit. I worked at 980 Madison for a little while. So I really got to know a lot of brokers, and in this business you'll find, I mean, people go 20 years in this business easy. So there was a lot of people that are still very much active in their careers that I had worked with back then. So it was I was very lucky to be able to light up those relationships and call people up and say, "Hey, I'm back in the game. What have you got? Let's go." And it was, the timing couldn't have been better, obviously, with the start of the pandemic and the major shift, the demographic shift that we all saw from the city to the suburbs.
Yeah, it was that really was good timing. I'm
Yeah.
sure it was accidentally good for you, but
Yeah.
what
Yes.
what a
Yeah.
what a fortunate thing. And yet still there's still a lot of competition, of course, where you are, and there's a lot of great realtors, and so I'm assuming you were able to take a lot of the sort of habits and disciplines and that you learned,
Oh
working the
yeah.
city.
I mean, I think, being a good salesperson is being a good salesperson. Like, you remember the Wolf of Wall Street,
Sure.
and that last scene, he had gone to the federal prison for
Yeah.
his tax evasion and fraud,
Yeah.
wire
Yeah.
fraud, and all the stuff that he had done. And he got out, and then he was giving seminars across the country and
Yeah.
holding. He said,
Sell me
"Sell
the
me
pen.
the
Yeah.
pen."
Yeah,
Right,
yeah, yeah.
right. And that's sort of that's the spirit, like, when if you have this skill, it can really work across a lot of different platforms. So while I
You're
was
so right.
good at doing it, and I was, a realtor in Manhattan selling co-ops and condos, it my skill set was very applicable as far as selling homes here up in the suburbs. It's just, we didn't have septic tanks, and we didn't worry about that, like, sewage and all that stuff. Roofs.
Yeah.
There's a whole other aspect of real
Yeah.
estate that goes on here that isn't necessarily. I mean, back in the city, you have to worry about co-op board packages, which, forget about it. I don't miss those whatsoever.
I always loved when my sister bought a condo or sorry, co-op in the West Village many, many years ago. And my sister's kind of a little superstar in her own in the industry she's in. And she was certainly more than qualified to buy this co-op. And she, they got the offer accepted. And this is like a million years ago, and I didn't know anything about real estate. She's like, "Oh, and now I have to go for my interview." And I was like, "Your interview?"
Oh
I
yeah.
was like, "What is that?" And so if no one's ever dealt with co-ops before, you can obviously look this up. But there's typically an interview process to make sure that because co-ops are slightly different. It's ownership share, so everyone's kind of owning everything to a degree. So they want to make sure that you're not some total bozo who's going to screw everything up for everyone. And so oftentimes you do have to go in front of the board
Oh
and
yeah.
forget about that you put 100% down or whatever. They're not evaluating that. They want to make sure personality
Yeah,
wise that
no,
you're
they
not a
wanna know
total joke.
they wanna know who your best friend was in 2nd
Yes.
grade. They wanna know your blood type. They wanna see all your bank accounts. I mean, they wanna know every little detail about you, and they
Did you?
each have a package about that thick in front of
Yeah.
you.
Did you ever
Um,
see it? Did you ever have a deal go south because the personalities didn't line
yeah.
up? Did that?
Oh,
Oh,
oh yeah. Oh
oh,
yeah.
brutal.
It was. I learned that game very quickly. It was my very first one of my first co-op deals. I remember I was dealing with the building on the Upper East Side that was a very snooty, you know, considered themselves quite an established and
Yeah,
prestigious building. It was a
sure.
50% down require. You had to put down at least half,
Yeah.
and then you had to have at least 3 times the amount of the apartment in liquid assets.
In liquid
Um,
assets. Oh,
in
nice.
liquid assets. Yep, on
So I
hand.
need to have like $4 million
Should anything
sitting in
go
cash.
awry, you know.
Yeah.
And I had a client who was like, "I'm paying all cash, and P.S. I have $50 million in the bank account. Let's rock and roll." The board came back and said, "Okay, we'd like to do the interview in on July 15th." My client said, "No, July's no good. What do you have in August?" So that was all they needed. That was it. That was the end. They said,
Sorry, you're not a fit. We need you to come in
"We're not
July.
interested." Yeah, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, that was it. They said, if that's how he's going to play it, forget. I mean, you have to, as though you're approaching, you're getting an introduction with the queen. I mean, that's how you have to think of it. Like, you have to
Like,
be so honored. You have to, like, if you've got plans in the
kiss the
south of
ring.
France, forget it. We don't care. Let's go. Like,
Isn't that amazing?
oh yeah, like
It's
when
a
they
different
call
world.
you, come. And I
But
learned that very quickly. Yeah.
and you probably have to then prepare your clients for those interviews and say like, okay, here's some suggestions about like don't speak unless spoken to, or whatever, only give the right answer, don't whatever the same sort of thing if you're going in for like being deposed by the attorney's
Pretty
like, don't
much.
say
Yeah.
anything that you
Right.
don't ask.
Just
But
be
any
like happy and
yeah.
affable, and talk about your golf handicap and the tennis match earlier that day, and that's about it.
So moving out to the suburbs, moving away from the co-ops, the condos, more single family homes, and really kind of learning a new inventory. I'm guessing is going out there and really trying to learn that. Real quickly though, just curious, I want to go just briefly back to your
Mhm.
very first year doing rentals and maybe some sales in the city in New York. How do you think, or why do you think you did so much better than so many other rookies that year? Was there anything that you can say, I was really good at X, Y, or Z, or I just did things that other people wouldn't do? Just curious on what you thought made the difference for you.
Well, for me, it was I worked as an assistant to one of the top producers, and a legend, and I was very lucky to work for this man. His name's Robbie Brown. He's no longer with us. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he is a legend in the industry, and an incredible guy, and not at all like a typical broker. Like, he was laid back. He rode a bike around the city. He would ride a bike to, to your listing appointments. He was so cool and casual about it. But that was on the exterior. Meantime, he was hustling like nobody's business. He was a great networker. He went to every party. He went to the opening of an envelope. He was there. He mailed the world. He had people working for him that he just grinded. It just sent, postcards out, blanketing the city with mailings. Like that age old adage that we love so much: if you throw enough shit on the wall, some of it's going to stick, type thing. This really applies when it comes to this. And the other thing that I learned from him is the value of relationships. He had certain clients that he worked with, that like it always goes back to the, it being a referral business, right? So like he had certain um people that he worked with that was provided a pretty steady flow of listings, and one of those sources was from estate attorneys.
Huge,
Yes,
huge,
yes.
brilliant.
And I thought, when I went out on my own, I emulated him to the T. And I first thing I did was I targeted attorneys.
So smart.
And and I and it didn't take too many. I had probably 2 or 3 estate attorneys, and I have one divorce attorney, kind of, that I really worked on developing those relationships with. I would show up in their office with lunch. I would bring donuts in the morning. I went around, introduced myself, dropping business cards, saying hello to everybody in the office. To the point where they started throwing me some listings. Smaller ones at first, and then when those would go well, they'd give me the bigger ones, and that's how I ended up getting that Dakota listing, was through this estate attorney. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, so it really is. If you think about it, it makes all the sense in the world. If you have a loved one that died and owns a Manhattan apartment, of course you're going to go with who your attorney recommends you use, especially if you're the benefactor of the estate. You don't live locally, or you just hand it right over. And so I would have to say that was really that was a critical move that I made, that differentiated me from the rest of my pack, let's call it, like, my incoming class.
And it's
Um,
funny because I've certainly heard of attorneys calling divorce attorneys, and of course, estate planning attorneys make all the sense in the world. I don't know why that wouldn't have occurred to me, but I think you might be the first person in all the hundreds of episodes we've done that have mentioned estate planning attorneys. So I'm almost thinking they may be a bigger opportunity in certain ways, because a lot of agents maybe do think, oh, I should call a divorce attorney and you should do that, of course, should develop those
mhm.
relationships. But estate planning attorneys maybe go a little bit forgotten, a bit.
Yeah, it's kind of
Um,
under the radar, but yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. That is,
brilliant.
yeah, that's 1,000%. That even more so than divorce attorneys, I'd say, because divorces can
Wow.
get complicated, and typically, especially if they're two people that are two parties that are have vested interest in that apartment. Usually, somebody knows somebody, they've lived in the town, they've got somebody they want to use. They're less likely to need the referral than an estate attorney would.
Great point. Because a
Hmm.
lot of times when mom and dad pass, and the kids now are to deal with all the estate stuff, or one of them, it's people are either moving or
Yeah,
they
right.
living in
Let's
different
say the
places.
kids live in Wisconsin
Oh,
or something.
love that.
They don't want to know from that. They just, it goes to the probate court, and goes through probate, I should say, and they'll trust their attorneys to handle it for them. And That's a really good spot. If you have a few relationships with some very, some successful attorneys that have quite a few clients or estates that they handle, it definitely, that is a huge place for inventory.
I could see too people realtors doing webinars or in-person events where it's like, hey, if you haven't done your estate plan, I'm going to bring my estate planning attorney and we'll do a little combo of like, a little
Right,
presentation.
right. I
I
scratch
could
my
see
back,
that
you
being
scratch yours. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, totally, definitely. That's very much the case. Again, with you're with attorneys, it's you're not supposed you can't technically you cannot they're not entitled to a commission on that sale. Like you can't
right.
say, "Oh, I'll kick it back to you," but you can in other ways, you know, it, try to have them benefit from your business as you are
Sure.
from theirs, and that is one way, is bringing them in for something like what you're saying, like a seminar, or recommending them to your
Sure.
clients or your sphere of influence.
And
That's definitely.
it's actually even more brilliant in a way that I'm thinking, at least from my perspective, because everybody who owns a home needs a will, right? So it's like every single person you work with could potentially be a referral to. I mean, it depends on what that estate planning attorney, what kind of client they want, but like every single person who owns a home should have some sort of estate plan in place, even if it's just some easy will that they could do. But it's a really smart, because not everyone gets divorced. So it's like, well, if somebody's getting divorced, I can certainly refer them to my the attorney I like. But everybody needs an estate plan,
Yep,
so
yep,
it's
yep.
it's actually boy, that
Everybody's
is
got
such
to
a smart
do
thing.
two things. You got to pay taxes and you got to die. Like, those two things are
And we don't know
inevitable and
when.
unavoidable.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about, I want to talk about the state of the market today, because you're a huge producer and the market is, at least I'm in Chicago. We have about 800 agents here at our firm. Um,
Hmm.
all I hear about, and our agents are great. I'm not here criticizing them at all, but I hear a lot of people being nervous about where rates are with lending. Obviously are higher than I mean, they're always too high for anyone really, but they're certainly higher today than they were 2-3 years ago. And we're approaching the sevens for almost 30-year fixes,
Hmm.
fixed. And then also inventory being, because there's this disincentive to move right now, right? So if I have a 3% mortgage, which I do, you'd have to really make a strong, not you, but a realtor would have to make a very strong case for me to go, I want to go from 3% to 7%. Like
I
that's a tough thing to
Yeah,
swallow, tough pill to swallow.
it
What
is.
are you experiencing, and how are you coaching some of your clients through this, so that so that it can make sense for them to make these decisions?
Well, it's been tough in that it really is a double whammy, because we're just coming off of COVID, the pandemic surge, where a lot of people that were sort of teetering or on the fence about selling, it was in their 5-year plan, let's say, and then this thing happens that drives the value of their investment up some 20-30%, and you're like, well, I better cash in. So we had a lot in the last 2-3 years. We've seen a lot of that, where people are cashing in their chips. So you've got a pause in the action of those people that would have been putting their homes on the market. They've already sold.
Yeah.
So we're taking a hit from that side. And then we're taking another from the interest rate side, because, like you said, I mean, people are sitting enjoying their 2-3% rates, but they're not seeing a dip in prices to incentivize them to, if they want to, downsize, get something bigger. If they want, we're just not. It's just not. There's no incentive for them to move unless you're moving to an entirely different area, um, or if let's say you're in a certain zip code because of the school system, and you want to move to a town where, or a different part of the country where the cost of living is much different. It's really like, it's not a choice. It's like you've got to move because of your job or because of a divorce, or it's just one of those instances. So we're really suffering with the inventory, and buyers are frustrated. It's a really tough time. I mean, I can't even imagine, you know, I'm working with buyers right now that are I've got buyers that are in the 5 million plus range, and then I've got several buyers that are in the like 1 to 3 range. And the 1 to 3 range is just, forget it. It
Yeah.
is so
So much competition.
so much competition, and they're going in, they're putting in offers, they're waiving contingencies, mortgage contingency, appraisal contingency, inspection contingency, forget it. We'll pay all cash, we'll close when you want, we'll put a statue of your family in the backyard for the rest of for the end of time for us to worship at your feet. I mean, but you're going against 30 other applicants. Like you are in a bidding war amongst, there are literally we're going against 20-25 different bids. So how do you win that? I mean, it is so tough. So a lot of times, like right now, when I'm doing with my buyers, is I'm looking at, expired listings. I'm looking at, I'm knocking on doors. I'm trying to go off market, because once you get involved with all of that craziness, when you are first 2-4 weeks to market on the MLS, if you're priced appropriately, it's going to be a madhouse. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
overpriced, you're overpriced, and that's that. You can't do anything about that. But like, if you're listing in the 1 to 3 range, it is going to be an absolute zoo, and you're competing against the same people over and over and over again, and it's incredibly frustrating.
Are there any tips you have to stand out in those offers? Any suggestions of, obviously, you don't have a ton of control over all those multiple offers, but just anything that has helped you get a little bit of an edge when you're submitting, an offer that is getting a dozen or more other offers.
Well, so again, this is where relationships do play a big part, because when you start to do a lot of business in a certain market, you get to know all the players, right? So like, if I know the listing broker, I know I've got an advantage, because I can talk, or even better yet, if I've done a deal with that listing broker and we know each other, we can trust each other, then I know that I can talk with that listing broker more frankly, and get more information for my client than an unknown.
Sure.
So that's where experience really is crucial. Like, you want to work with someone who's been around the block a few times, because knowing the landscape, knowing the players really makes a huge difference. Because if it's between you and your client, or Joe Schmo that from some firm you've never heard of,
With the
and
exact same offer,
all
you're
other
gonna
things
you're gonna
being
win. Yeah.
equal, right, you're going to
Yeah.
get it. So I would say that does play a part, for sure. The other thing I recommend doing is, the family resume always helps, like that cheesy kind of like, we love your house and we
The
live
love
like,
letter. Yeah.
right, and the photos with the family, and like, because people, homes are they're very sentimental, meaningful things to people who've raised a family in a home and spent decades of their life caring for this home. They really want to make sure that that home goes to somebody who's going to do the same thing.
Totally.
That's just, it's almost like that there is such a powerful emotional connection to to a home that you've lived in and raised your family in, and you don't want to sell that home to like a developer, or some investor, like somebody representing like a some guy in, or some Russian oligarch or something. Sorry. Like if you're a if you're nice people that have, like you like the school system, you're a nice family, you absolutely want to present that to the sellers. And you can get an edge. I mean,
Totally.
we just experienced this recently with a deal that I'm doing at the moment in Bedford, New York, in Westchester County. It was between my people or it was going to go to this developer who actually had put in a higher offer than we did.
Oh,
But this is, they're a young couple. They want to raise a family in this home. They love so this is another thing this is a tip that people love getting compliments on the work that they've done or the upgrades that they've done on the home. So, knowing like this was in 1930, um just almost it's a gorgeous home, but that they did so much work to it, upgrading it, decorating it, and painting, and the moldings and the chandeliers. They did all the fireplaces over. They really did a wonderful job. So we wanted to just we wanted to tell them what a brilliant job that they had done, how much we loved the materials that they used in their kitchen. We love the kitchen island, that granite is, get detailed. People love that stuff. They love
of
like
course.
why do we do anything, right? Like, why do we renovate our kitchens and bathrooms and put all this stuff on the wall? Because we want our guests to come in and say, "Ooh, wow, great." Like, that's why we do it, right? So like to get that recognition, to get that kind of like that's going to work in your favor. People do appreciate that.
What percentage, what would you guess, because you are up against multiple offers, of course, in the price ranges you're at, and you're coming in with some of the more human parts of it, the like, ooh, we really love what you did with the kitchen, the blah blah, and you can talk about that, or even maybe the buying couple can record a little video, or type out a letter, or hey, oh my god, it's so amazing. What percentage of offers do you think do that? Is it? It's got it. I know it was more popular during the pandemic when there were so many offers where it was like you had to do something to stand out. But now that that's subsided, but inventory is still low, and there are a lot of multiple offers now. Is that a common thing, or is that just something that, like, I imagine most realtors don't do that? They just put in the offer, see what happens.
Yeah, I guess it depends, on the deal. It depends on, like for example, if I'm representing one of those estates from a referral from a state attorney, like those kids in Wisconsin, they just want, they want to divvy up the money. They got to split it 4 ways. They don't care, or
Right.
something. It doesn't work all of it.
Sure.
It's not all the time. I guess I would apply it as needed. It's a situational kind of vibe vibe out. You got to suss it out and see when it's appropriate and where it's appropriate. And of course, like if it's appropriate for your client too,
Right.
because maybe you're not representing a really nice family. Like maybe you are representing,
Yeah.
um, an investor or somebody that wants to put subdivide it or do all or gut it or who knows. So it's that's sort of apply as needed is how I would phrase that. And that's
But
something that a good broker can vibe out, especially if you've worked with that listing broker before. That's in the due diligence information gathering stage. A good broker should be able to guide you through that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love that tip is if we think that the sellers have an emotional attachment to the upgrades they've made,
Hmm.
that can be something that the agent can ask the other agent, "Hey, my client really loves what you guys did with the kitchen." And then they can, can figure out how much you want to press that in the offer. But certainly, people are always love to be complimented on their work. So
Hmm. Hmm.
that is, even if it doesn't win the bid, it certainly is a good practice to compliment people on what they've done right with their house.
Oh yeah,
Um, because
absolutely.
also, if they're like most of us, I think most of us, like, we look in the mirror and we see the little imperfections in
Right.
ourselves. And I
Hmm.
think most people think about that way with their home as well. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I did this project, but then there's these like 10 other projects I didn't get to. So most people look at their home and they're like, oh God, I have so many things I have to do and I haven't done. And then when somebody comes in is like, oh, that thing you did is really cool. It's like, oh yeah, that's right, I did do that thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's really,
Yeah.
it's a
That's
nice little reminder.
yeah. I mean, your home is an extension of yourself. It is a representation of yourself. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
just like you said, we when we're living in it, we don't see how fabulous
Yeah.
we look and see the flaws, and we think everyone's going to come in and say like, oh, that is like the wall color she picked. Oh, like that. I remember when I first got my first apartment on the Upper West Side, and I stained the floors really dark. So it was like this pre-war apartment, and like the walls were this really high ceilings with like these moldings, beautiful, like a classic six apartment on the Upper West Side. And I stained them like, I just went for it. I stained them like ebony colored, so
Yeah.
really shiny and kind of contrasted the white walls and everything. But of course I was like, oh God, is it too dark? Like, did I
Yeah.
pick the right shade? And I
Sure.
remember like walking, I would walk in to get my first impression of the place, and then walk back out, and then walk back in to like get a fresh, like, I probably did that 20 times. And my husband at the time was probably like, oh my God, she's totally gone berserk. But it was that first friend that came over. I remember her name's Eve. We went to college together. She came over and she said, I love your floors.
And then you never had to think about it again.
And I was like, oh my God, God bless. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it just, yeah, you need affirmation. We all love and need affirmation.
Well, I have an all white condo. Everything's white, or in like white and black. The fixtures are black, but like the countertops, the floor is light. All the walls are white, and I can't wait for like 10 years from now. Somebody will walk in and go, "What were they thinking?" Because everything changes. At some
Oh
point,
yeah.
like the all white thing will just not be cool anymore, and
Hmm.
everything is going to look goofy at some point in history. So it's funny. So I'm looking forward to that because I remember when I bought my condo before in 2005, and we were doing certain things with granite, and that was real popular. And now it's like we look at those goofy granite, some of the goofier granite colors. We're like, what were they thinking? It's like, no, that was in back in 2005, and now the white thing has kind of been in for the last 5 years, and it's probably on its
Yeah.
way out
Then it was
at some
yeah, the
point.
bleached floors.
Yeah,
That had a run
yeah,
where it was like, those like bleached wood, and like
yeah.
Nantucket kind of shingles, and like everything's just like been in the sun for too long kind of look.
Right, right. It is funny, but it's important. I think agents sometimes forget that like there are real, if you're representing buyers, there's real human beings on the seller side. And if you have a good relationship with the listing agent, and that's where it's really important to play nice in the sandbox, right? It's like always,
Oh
and
yeah.
look, I know, especially I think women get, I mean, I don't want to generalize based on gender, but I think women get this much worse than men, is that there's just a lot of jerks that are realtors in the industry too. And I know a lot of women who are very successful in real estate who are like, you would not believe the way I get spoken to by other realtors on a regular basis. Like
Oh yeah.
you see, you're nodding your head. And it's like, well, who could ever be mean to Sarah? She's like a lovely, sweet person. oh, she has to deal with this too. And the reality of it is, it only is ultimately going to hurt the other agent if they're a jerk to you,
I
because you're not going to
know,
forget that. Yeah.
right? I mean, there especially like the whole like listing broker buyer buying broker dynamic. Like if you're the listing broker, you are like too cool for school. Like you are, you should be grateful if you get a return phone call from the listing broker. Yeah, like it's just that's the market that we're in right now. It's a seller's market, right? So like if you want to be on the sell side and like we're all the buyer's side, we're all sweating away and like, please, can we show it, please? Oh, you'll let us, like, you just have to be so nice and catch more flies with honey type thing. And the listing broker stuff, it's like, can we just lose the attitude? Like it's just like, please, I don't understand it. Like it's one of those like, when there's like an event for a cocktail for brokers or networking event for brokers, and people are like, why am I going to go to that? I don't want to meet a bunch of brokers. Like, I'm not selling to brokers. And it's like, no, you go to all those cocktail parties, you meet everybody, you handshake, you throw cards out, because you never know when that relationship is going to be important. And the bigger
Yeah.
your network, the more that business it's going to inevitably build. If you put it out there, it's going to build.
Yes, and you could not be more accurate there. And I've just heard that said over the years on the show by just about every person we've ever had on, is be really nice to other agents, and also realize that other agents might be having a bad day too, and give them a bit of grace when they falter, and maybe are less than professional, even though that's never acceptable to be less than professional, but it happens. And it's one
Oh,
of those things where, the top agents I know kind of learn how to grin and bear it a little bit more. It's not quite as personal to them when somebody's awful to them, and obviously that sucks, where to ever have somebody be awful to anybody. But this idea of like, I'm just going to catalog that, I'm going to remember that, and maybe in the future that maybe won't serve that person that was crappy to me, maybe
oh
oh,
yeah.
but I it, and we all
karma
want.
Karma happen. It's a karmic
It does.
retribution. It happens, and especially in a market like Greenwich, where it's a big market, but there are a few very strong players that you'll see again and again. And that the beauty of our business too is like, a deal has a beginning and an end, right? Like you can tolerate anybody for it through the length of time that it takes to sign a contract and get to a closing. It's not like you're going to have to go to a 9 to 5 job and see this person every day for the rest of your life. Like when the deal is done. And that's what I love. I love like the sense of completion, of achievement, of finale. It's over. So you can move on to the next one, but you just need to make it through, keep everybody happy till we get to the finish line.
I agree. I think that makes all the sense in the world. One thing I wanted to mention, because I know we're kind of coming up on near the end of our time. I was thinking about your, what you're. Oh, I know. I wanted to ask you. It was about what you do in between your deals. So you just talked about like there's a beginning and an end to the relationship. Some clients are easier to work with than others. Some you're like, I
Mhm.
can't wait to be this person's friend forever, and others are like, that was a nice experience, and we don't need to, keep communicating. But what do you do in between those transactions so that the clients don't forget about you, right? Like obviously you can't be friends with everybody, but are you doing, because if somebody's only really utilizing you every, let's say, 5 to 7 years, or whatever the cycle is in your
Mhm.
area,
Mhm.
what are you doing so that they don't forget, oh, who did we use 5 years ago? Not that
Oh
you're
yeah.
forgettable, you are not forgettable, but let's assume that
Oh,
we're all
thank
forgettable.
you.
We're all forgettable.
Oh, for sure.
And so we what are you doing to make sure your clients don't forget you?
I mean, you got to do all the stuff to stay top of mind, right? Like we all know the stuff. It's just there. It's not, this is the gritty pain in the ass stuff that we all, it's all like, we're not looking forward to it. We don't love coming up in your inbox all the time and being so annoying and videos and, like being in your face type thing. But it really, it matters. It's important. Like you have to stay top of mind, and that means continuously marketing yourself, reaching out, to your network, blasting out those emails, sending postcards. Social media obviously is incredibly important, and I always say it's more like, if you, it's not like you're, I personally don't get my phone's not ringing off the hook from my social media. It's not like someone's looking at a TikTok that I made and like, oh my God, Sarah, like it's you. You are the one. You have to sell our house. But what it does provide is like, it's when they go to do some due diligence on you and they go to check you out, a would-be client, they're gonna see all that stuff, and they're gonna feel nice and safe and snugly found that they're in good hands with you. Like, so that stuff all really, it accumulates. It makes you, as the time goes on and you've got more and more history, it's all the better. So you really just, you can't be afraid to put yourself out there. And I know that that's so, it's not easy to do. It's like, it's really, you got to take the good with the bad when it comes to that stuff. But you really, it's in this day and age, and it's crucial to not only maintaining your business, but really growing your business. You need to stay relevant to the conversation.
It also gives people access, right? Like it allows people to feel like they have a connection with you, even at 3 in the morning when you're asleep, if they're awake scrolling through Instagram or wherever, and they're now seeing like, oh, or maybe I know Sarah, or maybe I don't, or maybe I'm being introduced to her through a TikTok or whatever. But it allows people access to you, more about you, without you having to pick up the phone and make these cold calls, which you've done cold walking, you've done a lot of these more difficult sort of cold introductions, whereas social media is a great way for people just to be reminded of what you do, right? So it's like you can continually pump out content about all this cool stuff you're doing in real estate, in sort of the thought that like the right people will see it, my followers might see it, they'll at least be reminded I'm still in the game and doing X, Y, and Z for as a realtor. So I think it's a lot of just a branding thing, right? It's like it's more than that, but I think from a branding perspective, it's we know most people scroll in some sort of social media channel once or twice during the day. Might as well be one of the things they come across, right?
Exactly. And I mean, if you're not doing it, somebody else is doing it. I can guarantee you that. And like, and the more that we are in an online business, I mean, I think Zillow is a real game changer in the way that we have the availability of understanding your market and knowing what's on the market. We didn't have this pre 2000. I mean, the client had to solely rely on the realtor to show you what was available on the market at that time. So now they have access to pretty much almost every platform that you do. So how are you going to add value to that person? You know, how how are you going to enhance that experience for them, or provide them an experience buying or selling a home that a different agent can't, you know?
Yeah.
So that's really, you got to find exactly that, your brand, your vision.
What's really cool is you get to lean into that now. Whatever your thing is, like could be outside of real estate even. Maybe you're passionate about something, a hobby, or a particular belief system or group or whatever. You're just into X. And what's really cool as an agent with social media, one of the good parts of social media is you get to not only find all the other people that are into X, but even if you don't have a community of people that are into the same thing you are, you can start posting about that on your real estate page. If you're really into something, maybe it tangentially relates to real estate, or maybe it doesn't. But if you're into surfing or whatever you might be into, you can do that, and then people start to feel like, oh, that's pretty cool. This is what this person's into, and you can start attracting surfers or people who are in that space, simply by posting a lot of good quality content that a surfer might want, or that somebody that's into
Yeah,
cross stitch, or whatever it might be.
right. No, that
And you
like
you get
you
to be
open up.
yourself, which is really
You
cool.
blow open that entire different demographic that you wouldn't have had access to.
Yeah,
And that's like this job, you're always working, even when you're socializing and just generally having fun, like you're working. You're always you're meeting people, you're interacting with people. It's an opportunity to let that person know who you are and what you do, so that's why it's so important to I mean, obviously working your career is important, but when I'm playing tennis, or I'm playing pickleball, or even if I'm going to an event, a fancy Greenwich gala or something like that, that's always an opportunity to connect with somebody and to grow your business. So, like, it's a kind of a cool way to not feel guilty sometimes. Like, sometimes when, you're doing something that's not work, 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 you're like, oh, but really when I've gotten a lot of business from playing tennis, because
sure.
we women love to chit chat when we're playing a doubles match. Like, we're on the changeover. And like, who doesn't love to talk about real estate?
Sure.
Like,
And
so
everyone's got to live somewhere.
right. And like, it's so easy to casually be like, oh my God, you guys, the showing that I had earlier today, let me tell you. And they'll lean right in. They want to know. And my goal is always to make sure don't ever leave any social situation without them knowing that I'm a realtor. Like, that's
Right.
all I have to do.
That's
Is
all you have to do. Agreed.
I don't need to push it down there. I don't need to ram it down their
Yeah.
throat and ask them where they live and are they interested in selling in the next 5 years. I all I need to do is have them register that somewhere in their peripheral, that, oh, I played tennis with this lady and she's a real estate broker. And you just don't know how that's going to germinate. You just have
Yeah.
to
And,
plant
and it
that
might
seed.
And it might be that, like, that person's brother is a realtor, and so you're not going to
Right.
get that business, but they might say, oh, my friend, you need to talk to my friend. She would be awesome, because, so yeah, you're right. You never know where it's going to germinate. I love what you just said. Your job is as a marketer, part of being a realtor, is to make sure that everybody who you come across, that you interact with, understands what you do for a living. It does, right. Pushing is always, to me, I'm not a big fan
Yes.
of people who push things,
It's so
but I
off-putting.
want to know. I want to know what all of my friends do. I want to know where they work. Like, I have an interest in that. When I meet somebody, oftentimes what they do for a living might be the least interesting thing, but I still ask, and I still am like, oh, what are you into? What do you do? That's really, really important. We shouldn't be. Again, and also everyone's got to live somewhere, so they're going to need a realtor anyway. So you might as well. It's not like you're trying to sell them aluminum siding or something that they may or may not need or want, right? You're not selling something that's not important. You're actually like, well, you're going to use a realtor anyway. So it's a good idea to make sure that people know that that's what I do. So I want to end with that, because I think that is such an important important thing. For everyone listening, let's make it a goal that everybody in your life this year is going to get some sort of reach out from you in a gentle way, to remind them that you are in the business. And you can figure out the best way to do that. Everyone's got their own individual style. Make sure that everybody that you're consistently dripping something on them. Maybe not every week, maybe not every even month, but a few times a year at a minimum, they're getting
Right.
some sort of reminder that you
Mhm.
are a realtor. So Sarah, thank you so much. And I also want to say, for everyone, before leaving, don't leave yet, because I would like to remind everyone that Sarah is always we talked about having relationships with other realtors. Sarah gets a lot of her business from referrals because she's just that good. So if you have any clients that are moving in and out of Connecticut, even parts of New York, it doesn't even matter where, just reach out to Sarah. She can't help you. She'll know who to refer to, but she would love to connect with you specifically around, Connecticut, parts of New York as well. So we're talking Fairfield County, Greenwich,
Yep.
Westport,
Fairfield
Westchester.
County, Westchester County, right outside the
Yep.
city. Those are my wheelhouses, and I love referrals. I think you would. I never chintzy with referral fees.
Well,
And
and Sarah's clients oftentimes have other homes elsewhere or move. So if you are in an area that people maybe retire to,
yeah, especially
or
Florida. I've got
yeah, Florida is the
tons in
big one. Yeah.
Florida. Hmm.
So let's this is a two-way street sort of scenario. So definitely reach out to Sarah. Also, if you're a realtor in Connecticut and you're like, God, I would love to work with someone like Sarah. I would love for her to be on her team and learn from her. She learned from one of the best. You can learn from her. She's one of the best now. So now obviously she's she can't take everyone, but if you think you could add value to her team, or if you think she could add value to your business, reach out to her. This is let's build a relationship. So Sarah, if there is another realtor who wants to connect with you either for a referral, or maybe they're interested in looking at Douglas Elliman or your team, what's the best way they should reach out to you?
Well, they can find me on my Insta, which is at Sarah Stone Style. And if not that, my cell phone, my email, which I don't know if you can provide that in the notes,
Sure.
but
Yeah,
always reach out. My website is element.com/Sarah Stone, and there I will be. And I would love to connect with as many listeners as I possibly can. And really, this is fun. I would love to do this again sometime, DJ.
totally.
It's a total
It,
pleasure. I could chat with you all day. So
Yeah, it was so much fun. So everyone, definitely follow Sarah on Instagram, Sarah Stone Style. We will have links to her email, also her website on in the show notes. So please feel free to connect with her. She's super easy to find. And make a connection with her and let her know what you thought of the episode. And also, maybe you guys could do some business together. So, or maybe you could join her team. So anyway, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Sarah is a huge superstar. We're so grateful to have you on the show. So on behalf of the audience, thank you. And
my
on
pleasure,
behalf of
really.
and we want to also thank the audience too. So on behalf of Sarah and myself, I want to say thank you for listening and supporting our show. Support our sponsors. Thank you for watching and listening. Please just tell one friend about this show. That's the only thing we ask. I guarantee everyone listening knows one realtor that could use a little bit of help this year. It's a tough year for realtors. So let's send them a link to this episode. Maybe it'll help them get to the next level in their business. So Sarah, thank you so much. We will see everybody on the next episode. Thanks, Sarah.
Pleasure.